and I'm welcoming you on behalf of Neil, our chairman, and our branch to our headquarters, Squires. It is right on the very eastern edge of our region of the West Riding, but there are all kinds of reasons for that. But since we moved here, our membership's rocketed, so we're not sorry that we moved here. We've got people here from all kinds of branches. The idea of this evening is Jeff's, he's going to speak in a minute, to try to get together the three Yorkshire branches, which is West Riding, Yorkshire Rose and Yorvik. We've got people here, and welcome to you, from other branches in the country, some from Derby, some from Nottingham, some from Shropshire. Anybody else? Glasgow. The Weeges. He hasn't come from Glasgow today. He's in the Glasgow branch, but he hasn't come from Glasgow, I know that. So you're very welcome to Squires. It's the first of our get-togethers as three Yorkshire branches, and we hope there'll be more. Certainly next year, 2026, we're organising a joint rally, the first ever Yorkshire rally, 26th to 28th of June at a place called Syke House. Anyway, you'll see all it advertised in the cell, so if you're a rally or a camper, please do make an effort to come to that. Domestic notices. The toilets are through those doors there, where it says toilets over the door. And now we've even got lights on in the toilets. If there's a fire, which there won't be, but if there is, there are two fire exits. One is where you came in, and the other one is through the left-hand set of patio doors in the other room. Don't try the right-hand doors because they're locked. The left-hand doors are open. So if you need to get out quickly, that's the way out. So now, the man whose idea it was, Jeff Walton.
Right, I'm not going to bore you. I'm just going to introduce the bloke you've all come here to see. This man's affected just about everybody in this room, one way or another. So don't throw anything at him until he's finished. Please welcome Norman Hyde.
Right. Notice the sign on the wall is all in Dutch, because they look after me even better than the Yorkshire. Right, thanks so much for everybody for coming. It's a real treat for me to see so many faces from our great club. I never stop telling the non-biking world at all levels how great. Let me just give you this story I've been repeating a lot of times. A good chum of mine, Neil Toxworth, the ex-Honda man, Lincolnshire, was telling me one weekend last year at Cadwell Park there were 65,000 people and one policeman. Up the road in Lincoln City Football Club there were 20,000 people and 45 policemen. That's a great story. And I mean, wasn't it wonderful at Chelsley last year, 1,000 of us getting pissed, eating grub, dancing, music, super, no stress. Anyway, how did I get onto that? Right, so thank you very much. Appreciate. I think have we got the Triple Owners Club here as well, somewhere? No, they were invited. Oh well. Right, so thanks for all yours being Yorkshire. Of course, we can't help but mention Eric Bloodaxe, can we? The last King of York, and of course his predecessors. I'm sure you all know when they were in charge. Sigtryggr, Guthrith, and various other Vikings. Because I come from Mercia, where we were always fighting the lot from overseas. Now, as you both know, I've had a few health problems, so I sometimes fall over. Although I'm okay when I'm on two wheels, I don't have that problem, so I apologise for that. I mentioned, and I mentioned to the ladies in the room, I don't do woke. We just took, as they say on the television, the standards of the time when it was made. Yes. Well, I was made in 1945, but anyway, So I put together something I haven't done before, which I'm trying to, because it was 61 years ago I joined Triumph. I'm trying to cover 60 years sort of in an hour and a half, which is so not too much detail. And let's get the show on the road. There I am, 1947. My first three-wheel. It's not as fast as the later three-wheelers, but yeah, it just reminds me, looking at the light on the front, when I left school and I had to go to Birmingham to Avery's, who made scales and weighbridges. I bought two 500 AJS's, one for £5 and one for £2, 10 shillings. And I used that one of those lights on the front and the old round bullet one on the back, and used to ride through the winter from Warwick to Birmingham. You probably get locked up with lights like that these days, but it's a changing world. Then, the ACU, I'm the one with the white thing on my Francis Barnett. Wonderful. Whatever happened to the RAC ACU training scheme? They say, oh, you couldn't get youngsters' attention these days. That was 12 Sunday mornings, off-road and then on-road, but then 12 Monday nights where they taught you about how engine gearboxes work and brakes and stuff. Wonderful, wonderful thing. And then we got to be proper bikers. Well, that's us at Mallory Park in the mid-60s. My dear wife in the front with the Alice band. We've been married 58 years now, and there's at least 10 happy years included there. And we all had 350s, the Velocets and AJS's, Maxlesses and BSAs and things. Good times. Well, again, and doesn't matter, you can go on new bikes, old bikes. Bikers just get on together and have great fun. Right, so then, so I got a job at Triumph. Yeah, as I said, the first place I went to for an apprenticeship was Avery's, and they put me, although I'd done A-levels, put me on a sort of equivalent to an O-level course, an ONC. And it's funny how things can work out. So I decided I want to move to Triumph, and I went for an interview. And because they'd put me on a course that I found easy, I could show the Triumph boss that my lowest exam result was 93%, to which he said, when can you start? So I became the first sort of full-time degree level Triumph apprentice, and still got my embossed paperwork that I completed. So Triumph, again, trying to get across what was such a different world. How it was, there were, in round figures, about 1,800 people there making 1,000 bikes a week. As an apprentice, I went all around the different sections for rough stores, machining. I mean, Triumph was always very proud of their chrome plated. So I mean, working in there, to do the polishing, today you just buy the cotton wheels with the grit on that you want. Not in those days, you didn't. You had gas-fired burners with melting glue and associated fumes, and you've got your cotton wheel, and you've got a big brush full of glue, glued the outside of it, and then you had very narrow, long, thick plywood sided boxes, and you had to roll the glued edges down this to create your own wheels. Different world. It was very handy when you were racing, as I was doing, to get the guys in the polishing shop to do things for you. And then, say, the machine shop, I was just explaining how things were done by hand, generally with drilling machines, drill a hole, tap a hole, put the crankcase on the next pile, and then that'd be picked up by the next guy. And the crankcase just went a long line. So the very first machine, the first day I started work, I was surprised to find we were still making side valves. I have to say at this point carefully, they were for the Israeli army. I'll get into that. My first job was reaming the fine finned Tiger 100 barrels, replacement barrels, upside down, reaming the holes for the dowel. And I managed to, when I lifted the drill up, pick the end of the bloody barrel up and made a double wedge-shaped hole, which didn't make very popular on day one. And next to that was the double boring machine for doing 650 barrels, and it was a pre-World War I machine. Because remember, they had friends, the Germans here, our friends the Germans managed to flatten the original Triumph factory, and they've built Coventry Cathedral over it. Must be a connection between, God rides a Triumph, mustn't there? So you've got to have all the different sections, and this particular piece is the, as you can see, the assembly tracking. Motors are pushed along by hand. There are side sections where cylinder head assemblies and gearbox assemblies were put on. I always think if making, say, 200 of these a day, the toughest job was the guy who was putting the barrels on, because we were using Hepburn Grandage piston rings and HG10 material. It's amazing what I can remember. I can't even remember what I did this morning. And they were very brittle. So this old guy, Ernie, he had to wipe all the, he had an anti-static velvet cloth that he used to wipe down, and then every Friday afternoon it was ceremoniously rinsed out and hung up to dry over the weekend. You don't get these stories everywhere, you know. But what a job, to get your twin barrel in your elbow and fit 200 of them. So then we move on to the track. Here's, one of the big things that was going on was that after the war there was huge new demand for Triumph bikes and many, many other things. So 85% went to America. There was never any stock. The first thing when a chassis was put up was a label on it saying who it belonged to. And Coventry was the highest paid place in England, and Triumph was the highest paid place in Coventry, which meant the unions were very strong. It used to be very interesting how, because everything was piecework, was that generally the unions managed to get their way. We want another threepence on this job, this and the other, except when, because the new bikes started on September the 1st, come the middle of July, it was too late to send any bikes to America. And the unions never worked out why they were always refused extra piecework money in August, because it didn't want to make so many bikes. But yeah, and of course there used to be union meetings. I say, Joe mine had to apologise to the electricians union for putting a plug in the wall. There'd be meetings in the car park where if it didn't go the right way, you had a pause for 10 minutes, shouted at a few of the members and then had a re-vote. But no, back to the point, sorry. Yeah, just think of the guys who had to fit tyres, 400 tyres a day, to security bolts in the back wheel. Because everything is drawn immaculately, as everything was done in the old days, big drawing office, chisel point pencils. The only thing that was never quite done was exhaust pipes, because of the spring. Different batches of steel would spring differently. It always made me smile when, so I was making Toga exhaust pipes, and I'd get one of you guys on the phone saying, "I've had this bike from you. Your new exhaust pipe doesn't fit it, it hangs down at the bottom. The new one, the standard one fitted perfectly, why doesn't yours?" And I say, "Well, you didn't actually see the assembly of the bike, of your bike, sir. When the exhaust pipe was put on, there's a guy standing there with a fork stanchion who pulled the back of it up, while another guy with a big rum and mallet belted top out of it until it did fit. So, yeah, piecework, hard work, and all the wheels, well, the wheels were all built by ladies, or nearly all. Arms like bees' wings, tough job building wheels. So again, to that thing's fitting, you have to remember that some of the tolerances on the chassis parts were plus or minus 1/8 of an inch, not quite in the sort of thous. But again, remember the factory was, say, built in a lot of it in the middle of the war. Right. So, yeah, of course, the big change down below in the 71 models, but of course the frames up till then were sort of harsh brazed, malleable iron ends, and brazed in a big hearth, like a blacksmith job, whereas it turned into this where a lot of welding. And while we're looking at the oil in tube frame, one common question is why do the later bikes carry less oil than the old ones? I'll give you the exact answer. All the work was done with the filler behind the steering head. Plenty of oil. But then when they got tested severely, the testers would brake so hard that in spite of trying to stop it happening, oil would spray out of the filler at the front. And so, how are we going to solve this? How are we going to solve this? Well, look, temporarily, we'll put the filler on the bend of the tube and just reduce the oil while we sort it out. Never did get sorted, did it? That's the factory. I only found this picture recently. That's the Triumph factory, as was, the lawn in the front. And of course, at the time it was the main Coventry Birmingham Road. The experimental is the lower. That doesn't work, does it? This lower part on this end. Progress and other things up here. My office was here next to Doug's. The bottom here was where the girls, all the comptometer operators and all the silly things we used to have to do. And then there was another drawing office up on the top over there. And the big sign is on the top, as you can't see there, but now belongs to Triumph again. Right now, round the corner from the experimental was the comp shop. Oh, there's the great man, Doug Hill. I've never met anybody like him. Absolutely focused, absolutely focused. I'll tell you one or two stories as we go on looking at things. Absolutely, 100%. You know, he would ride a bike every day. He'd have a pencil and paper by his bed. I remember once he was saying, I was doing the washing up last night, I watched the water go down the plug hole and I had an idea for a carburettor Venturi. It was like that all the time, never gave in. I'll tell one silly story. He's a Brummie, Longbridge, and they're very proud of their water supply, thanks to the Victorians who did a big underground pipe from Wales. He used to bring a small jam jar with a screw top full of Birmingham water and used to dip his comb in it every day. There you are. Fascinating, isn't it? Sod all to do with bikes, but there you go. Right, here's a bit of the comp shop. Henry Vale, who was the foreman of the experimental, very inconsistent man. Nice as pie one day. When I was just a lowly apprentice at 19, he told me to give me a kick in the backside, go and make the coffee. And I told him I wasn't here to make the coffee, I was here to learn about it. So I ended up in front of the apprentice supervisor, but we survived. That's Vic Fiddler, who, and along with Bob Haynes, were the two men who were in charge, the only two men in the comp shop. and we were like the 6 days trial, for example, and we'd be building gold medal winning bikes with 2 blokes, and you know, having the reliability, the type of performance and everything that was needed. And yeah, I was in there as an apprentice for a bit, and of course, great. In fact, I did a luck. Oh, that's me outside the comp shop. Right, yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, comp shop's just behind. The big door you can see on the side, you went in there and you turned right, and there was a guy, a little welding booth. And again, the things that we forget, I mean, the welder used to smoke at least 60 ciggies a day, and the first 2 hours in the morning you couldn't understand. Yeah, he couldn't talk. On the left of the big door, there was a trike vat. I think they'd been banned. It was lovely vapours to sniff. It made you quite happy. And it was great for cleaning steel, but we never told the apprentices, of course, it melts aluminium, dissolves aluminium. So we'd say to some young sprout, get a hook on it, you know, on this cylinder head and hang it in the trike vat after that. Come back in the morning and say, I don't know what's happened, but there's just a valve collar. Where's the cylinder? Yeah, that was, I don't know what, that was for the local newspaper, I think. Right, yeah, so what we took 6 days trials. This is 1964. We've got the bricks on the front, the yanks on the back. So on the left, the great Johnny Giles. Anybody's old enough to remember when Scrambling was on the TV. He was the Triumph man. And tough as iron. No, the one story, I mean, he used to win a lot, but he had a stone through his goggles and lost an eye. And after a few months, he got back riding again, but he kept not winning, he kept falling off. And then after a few months of that, he got back to winning again. And everybody said, well, what happened? What's changed? He said, well, I'm with one eye, I can't judge distances very well. So if I wasn't sure what I was doing, where I was, I shut off and fell off. So I decided, policy change, when I was sure where I was, just nail it flat and hang on. Got back winning again. Then you've got Roy Peplow, Ray Sayer, Ken Haynes, who ended up being a big dealer. The Yanks on with the Triumph shirt is the Bud Eakins, the famous French jumper, and what's his name? Steve McQueen, right. And all of the riders said he wasn't as good as he thought he was. But with those bikes, you know, you think a six days trial, right? So that's a lot of bloody hard work, sweating under your barber jacket, and we always had hard to beat the East Germans because they would cheat. They used to sort of ride one of the bikes that was knackered into a wood and come out with a shiny new one, stuff like that. But part of the thing, imagine you've been riding for a few days and you're absolutely whacked, and an official comes out and says, show me your rear inner tube. And you have to throw the bike down, get the inner tube out, hold it up, put it back in. Okay, they had an air cylinder, pump it on, but they still had to do the spanning and security bolt. I used to watch them practice that, and they could do it from stopping the bike to riding away 4 minutes. They were. And that's one of the reasons we got gold medals. And just to prove, right, there's me, age 19, Gamsey, knitted by my mother. And I was obviously a bit cheeky because I'd only been at Triumph for a few months, and I was a member of the local bike club thanks to the training scheme. And I said, is there any chance I could borrow a bike for the weekend? And I said, oh, we're a bit short of bike. You can have this one, but be careful with it, it's Steve McQueen's. It was of course like God at the time. So look at the registration number.
Yeah.
There he is. And the bit that really got me in trouble, I was sprinting a Tiger Cupboard at this time, and I was riding his bike back to the factory on a Monday morning with a pair of Cub flywheels up my barber jacket, and they dropped down and scratched the back of the tank. Oh no! Oh, don't worry, kid, we'll stick another tank on. You know, when you're making 1,000 bikes a week, and I'll tell you another little side, because your petrol tank was an important part, you know, that and the chrome silencers. And so you could go along to the paint shop, imagine they're painting, and the old boy Ted is doing the lines, the gold lines on 1,000 tanks a week. And you go along and say, I'm looking for a petrol tank. What bike is it? I've got, it's a 2-year-old Bonneville. Oh, okay, what colour do you want? Oh, I want a red and silver one. Have you got a scratched one of those? Because you could buy them cheap. He said, no, we haven't actually, but don't worry, kid, we'll soon scratch one for you. Right, that's a picture of the experimental. I'm trying to give an idea about how the world has changed. You know, we were racing against companies like Honda had 1,000 in their development department. We had about 15. That's the race half, and behind the camera is the road half. So the road guy, it's all lined up bike stands. You can see just above the top of the fairing a chemical balance. And if you look very carefully, you can see the rail holes where the brass weights used to fit. That's what we used to use for weighing pistons and conrods. And under the cloth, over the screen of the fairing, that's a part-built engine. No fancy engine stands. When you wanted to turn it round to work on the other side, you had to get one of your mates to undo the vice while you held it and turned it round the other way around. This is Fred Swift, Jack Shemmons, Arthur Jakeman, and top men, absolutely top guys. And you can see the bike. This is a Formula bike, and then there's production bikes at the back. Different sorts of testing. I'm thinking about the road bikes. We had ideas coming from the drawing office, official new projects of some different types, from complete engines to modified bits and pieces. And of course you needed, I mean, a lot of us find it hard to actually take an engine apart and put it back together in the same way it came apart. So you imagine the skills that you need to get a cardboard box with them assorted bits and a drawer in, and you've actually got to put it together. You've got to decide, this doesn't feel right. Is it a draftsman's mistake, the fit of this, or is it the machinist's mistake? Or what, you know, that type of thing all the way through, which is fairly tough. And of course the testing, you'd have some things that will be tested up by the testers. You know, have to do 200 miles a day all year round. So the bikes used to have a new rear tyre and chain every 3 days. So it always makes me smile when somebody said, I only got 3,000 miles out of my rear tyre. And I said, Christ, you know, we used to get 600. But yeah, it was legendary that we all had 2-position throttles shot and flat out. That was it. And there used to be wonderful stories where you say the front of the experiment is onto behind the grass, and then there's the road. You have a tester come in, get off the bike, run through the experiment and disappear. And 2 minutes later, the old bill would turn up. Where is he? How do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean? And of course, the bike, the good old bike in those days, used to tinkle fiercely when they were cooling down with all the temperature changes of the metal. That one's it. No, I'm still. You tell him. We'll catch it next time. And it used to be standard. I mean, I used to get it. We've been following you at speeds in excess of 95 miles an hour. And I mean, I used to get away with stuff. Oh, I'm only an apprentice. I've only borrowed the bike. Will you get in trouble if I pinch you? Yes, officer. On your way. And if what have you got? What's special on the bike? Oh, I'm testing some rear suspension. I need to go around the fast bumpy corners. Yes, okay. Used to get away with fair stuff. I mean, another one, pre-computers, there used to be three endorsements and you're off the road. Well, Percy Tate used to have 3 driving licenses. And he still used to get, Doug, he'll have to write to the magistrate saying how important the work was with all the bikes going to America, export. Because again, not everybody remembers how the country was short of money. You know, I mean, I can remember when you wanted to go into Europe, you could only take 25 quid or 50 quid with you for your holidays. That was it. You know. So does anybody else remember that? Anybody else 80? No, you youngsters. Right. Yeah, so we had guys that day, stuff coming in down the official channels, and then lots of companies would like to supply their bits when we're making 1,000 bikes a week, whether it's gaskets, tyres, chains, anything you can think of. So we'd have, this sort of thing is my job as development engineer, where I can look at stuff and either chuck it in the bin or say, put it on my going home bike, or we'll put it on a test bed, or we'll take it off-road to MIRA, the Motor Industry Research Association. And of course the testers used to have, there was a big triangular bank circuit, there was a more normal circuit, there was Belgian pavé, there was the timing straight, and there was twin 1 mile straights, like a bit of dual carriageway. And sometimes we'd go there and there were Triumph Norton and BSA testers. So there were lots of backsides being pinched at 100 miles an hour by the enemy coming up and grabbing you, weren't expecting it. Another favourite, some part of it was marked out with 50-gallon oil drums, and the real clever testers could actually drift sideways into one of those and knock them down the road. Unfortunately, Myra got the idea and filled one up with concrete, which gave the Norton tester a broken leg. And yeah, I mean, these guys, could they ride? I mean, I've seen where the exhaust pipe is actually worn through to its centre line. So instead of being a pipe, it's just a semicircle. And you can see the flame going through it. And yeah, lots of daft things. Yeah, on the Belgian pavé, the very first gas, we had this period in the centre, and gas rear suspension, gas filled, they used to explode. Because gas, compressing gas and oil is not too clever. And then of course the third, right, so you've got internal projects, external coming in, and then the ideas that we had in our shop from the 15 guys. And when I started, there was no system to record that, so I started it off. And it's all in my latest book, ladies and gentlemen. There might be 1 or 2 copies in the building, where I got a book out and recorded everything that we did from 1968 till it folded up, 75. Some things I didn't forgotten that we did, to be honest. But you can see a big range of things. Right, so on to the racing bit and the test bed, because everything would be mega computerised these days. Now there's a test cell and 3 great men. Brian Jones, the chief designer of Triumph, Doug Heel, chief development engineer, and the third one it's the legendary Philip Vincent. And the engine is the 350 overhead cam that never quite happened. You can see, well, first thing is you can see there's actually solid protection, and particularly the racing 500 used to explode, and you're actually there and suddenly there's red hot bits of metal flying around your ears. You wouldn't do that today, would you? There's a big fan in the cellar, so it's about a foot square, but you've got 100-mile-an-hour blast. That's not something you can easily stand up on. And the Heenan and Froome water brakes, which I was amazed at recently, they were patented in the 1850s, before internal combustion engines were invented. They were used on steamships. Basically it's a seesaw job, where the engine's trying to turn it one way, and there's a spring stopping it, and how far you load it on the spring turns the dial. But of course, it was, so it could be a bit dangerous. One of the dodgiest things I remember doing was standing astride a racing 500, doing the thick end of 10,000 RPM, twiddling with a pair of GP carburetors. Right, so that's my old chum Jack Shannon's. That's showing the outlet where there's another fan outside, and you can see he's working on a 650 engine, paired with Grand Prix carbs, and that's actually the test bed at BSA. And obviously you can see that's a brand new engine being tested. And of course, when the workers' co-op happened, they were all coming out with a thing, it's the Bonneville is the real triumph. That's the one, Bonneville. And that only because the triple engines were all built at BSA. So the strikers that formed the co-op couldn't ever possibly make 3 cylinders. But of course, when you're actually doing a power curve, it's a long sort of process, because you might say start at, depends what engine you do. If you start at 4,000, you've got to get everything stable, then take the reading, then you go up to 4.5, let it get stable, and you could be working on the same thing for a couple of months, because the variables you're taking into account. Say you work on a 500 race engine, you might have a camshaft with a bit more lift or a bit more length. You might decide to alter the inlet port a bit bigger, a bit longer. You could maybe have a bigger diameter exhaust pipe or a different length. You could alter the valve timing. Then you've got the ignition advance, and all those things interact. And you think you're getting somewhere, and then the arse falls out of the barometer, and then you're stuffed. You have to go and have a walk for a couple of days, because there might be 5% less oxygen in the atmosphere. So you could jet down, but it's still never going to give you the power you want. Put the ratio right. But, so it's a long old job sorting things out. But again, in my book, I've got the actual power curves that I drew of the 1971 Daytona triples, showing we were up to 85 horsepower, and it lists all the figures for each rider, tells you who rode what the compression ratio was, and everything. All really interesting stuff. There's something you won't see anything like this unless you've got my book. That's an Aspen rotary engine. The valves, instead of going up and down, I'll go round and round like a cone with slots in. And there are quite a few companies experimenting with that, but a bit like the Wankel, it wasn't really ever any good. There's Edward Turner's idea of an overhead cam 650. I think he was losing his marbles really. you've got the chain up this side, but bear in mind the barrel's cast iron, it left no airspace between the chamber with the chain in and the barrel. So the right hand piston was very short of cooling. So when you made it do some work, piston seized up. Yes, I spent a couple of months on that bloody engine trying to sort it. Oh, sorry, slightly wrong order. That's another view of the rotary valve engine. You can see it's a Triumph crankcase. Right, look at a bit of the racing side. That's a 500 racer. Very, very basic beginning proprietary tank, standard front brake. Keep the Americans happy, American style exhaust. Then the next year we had a decent front brake, fairing and different bits and pieces. And it always does that. I've never, anybody has any idea how you can get a JPEG that's right. If I take that memory and put it in my computer, it's right. But one picture in 20 decides to turn 90 degrees. No, it does that. I know that's just showing a close-up of the 67, late 67. You see, we beefed up the frame a lot. You'd see remote contact breakers, oil tanks at the front, oil cooler at the back, and its line contact rockers. And you can see the welding between the fins. That's through bolts going right the way through. And of course, the coefficient of thermal expansion of different metals, so important, so important. So, because the bolts are steel and the head and barrel are aluminium, we had to start off, when cold, a head torque of only 4 psi. So they used to whistle and squeal like a pig when they were cold. But when it was a working temperature, it was fine. But it always makes me smile when people say, I'm going to fit stainless steel head bolts because they look smart. Have a look at the expansion lines. And of course also the friction, because stainless steel stuff is much likely to come loose. But you have to think about what actually goes on when things get hot. But I mean, that's basically the bike as the best result we ever had, which was a Spa in Belgium, which I was talking about. I believe we have a Belgian in the room. Hello, Chris. Right, that's the Grand Prix there on the old circuit that was. It was a fierce job. Percy Tate finished second to Agostini, averaging something like 116 miles an hour for 100 miles, which, considering it started off as Edward Turner's 20 horsepower 350 engine. That's what you call proper development. Beat all the Nortons and Lintos and what else. Of course, he could ride like a loony, which helped. And there he is. This is coming back to, I mentioned Mara, where we were doing straight line testing. So you might be trying different cams, different air filters, different ignition timing. But one size on the main jet would only alter you by about 2 miles an hour. So you had to be really consistent. So the standard thing was rear footrest, and you can't see it there, but your left hand's holding, you should be holding the top of the fork leg. And change gear at exactly the right time. And that's splayed head, early time. Right. So I'm trying to think. Oh yes, another one that happened to me. So this is off-road. There's a piece of straight dual carriageway, barriers up the middle, and it's private, so no problem. You don't have to look where you're going too much. And I'm doing T150 oil cooler tests with a company called Coventry Radiator, where I'm doing 50 miles and then measure the oil temperature. different colours. And so I'm surprised, I'm sort of circulating about 115. So the 2 dead straights and then a full circle come back, go the other way. And I look up and there's a bloody tipper lorry tipping soil, and it's across, you know, it's a dual, 2 lane, but it's across 1.5 lanes. And I look up and go, and there's a bloke standing by the front of it. I don't know who was more scared, him or me. I was going between this bloody lorry that shouldn't have been there and the barrier rather quickly. There's Percy again. That's a very early Thruxton. It's got a scoop on the front brake, long UK silencers that have the middle taken out. Getting down to it, right. Now, that is the official. We all have an idea, well, those of us who are into this, of what a Bonneville Thruxton is. Drop bars, fancy pipe silencers. That is the official launch of the Triumph Thruxton. That's what they're meant to look like. And as you can see, the young lady, we were into big twins. I believe she was actually taken by Edward Turner over for a holiday in America. It's probably a horizontal holiday. Right. Looking at frames again, this is moving on to the 3 cylinders. Now this frame is always the thing for the works 3 cylinders, but again you'll see from the dates in my book, when you get a copy, that the first frame was built in 1968, before the first triple ever came out. And it happened because we'd done such a lot of work on the 500, and when riders were every weekend, Alton, Cadwell, Mallory, lots and lots of races. And Percy was trying to race a 650. They got a standard frame and it hadn't got enough power, so he said, I need something better here. So I got involved with making it into a 750, which was fine. But unbeknown to me or anybody else, he'd borrowed, in inverted commas, a frame drawing and given it to a mate of his who was a welder in Coventry. He did a bit of grass track and speedway stuff. A guy called Rob North. And a frame like that appeared with one alteration. What you see on this one, where's it? Pratt. Right, between the back of the front frame here, there was a vertical tube up to the seat rail. I think that was because there hadn't been any other frame with seat rails as thin as these, and because it goes well as the one rider, it's got serious load from the suspension that go over a bump. And of course Doug recognised it because the front loop is very much like his MC1 BSA that Jeff Duke was supposed to win the World Championship on but never did. We put the new 750 twin in it, and obviously it was a big step forward. But at the time, the next year, the triples were coming along, and at some stage it was realised that the drawings that Percy had borrowed were old enough to be pre-Doug Hill and got the old head angle, 65 degrees instead of 62. And it happened that this frame was converted to take a triple, this first frame. And Gary Nixon rode it and practiced for the race of the year and said, there's something wrong with this, it's not steering. And then we realised that the batch that had been made had been corrected. The mistake was found, but we forgot this first bike had been altered. So Rob North was at the Wednesday afternoon practice at Mallory. So Rob had to chuck the bike in his van, drive home changed the steering angle 3 degrees without taking the engine out of the frame, took it back, and Gary Nixon said, that was it, you've sorted it. And it all did its stuff. But interestingly, it came back to bite us because in the autumn, Percy was up with me at Elvington doing records, because it decided to use a works triple. I think we got the British 750 flying mile, possibly, about 159. But of course, the records, you have to have the head and barrel lead wired together and various other things. And of course, although it's old hat now, it's all exciting. So it's in the open by the side of the airfield where the officials come and cut the lead, and then you have to lift the cylinder head off. And everybody's straining to see what's inside a works engine. And the head wouldn't come off because it had been altered. The edges of the fins were hitting on the frame rail. Well, luckily, Fred Swift, who was the mechanic, could dash through his toolbox and get out what we used to call a big rough bastard. And to everybody's amusement, file the ends of the fins off so the head could come off and it could be measured. So, altering things on the job can be tricky. And of course, frames have moved on since. I mean, we were still on triangular tyres because so you got a lot of rubber on the road when you're leaning over at the prescribed angle. But when you're in a straight line, you're about less than 2 inches. On a wet road with a works triple, that wasn't much fun. So they did come out, then this tyre they'd done for MV, so we started getting those. But of course now, when I did my Harrier frame, I had to really alter, the side stresses, things so that you could break into a corner. In the old days, you'd just brake hard and then peel off. I guess we're all watching the Superbike and MotoGP for the photography. It is breathtaking, isn't it? Absolutely stunning. Right, here we go. We made one Rocket 3 work racer, which is made at Triumph, not BSA. And that's an official photo. That's official for homologation for production racing. You had to have made at least 100. When we came out with the triples, it became very obvious that the engines were too low. They were dragging on the ground. So I represented Triumph on the ACU appropriate committee. And so I had the job, and of course we know money and power always wins. The rule had to be changed from saying you will race with a standard frame to say you must race with a standard type of frame. And the little word type meant that we could move the engine up, I think it was an inch and a quarter, which came into production on T160s. And then we started winning some races. Of course, there was a list of all the things that were fitted in the works races, which were available, but I know they weren't. But again, starting with a standard bike, we did lots of good stuff. There's the great late Gary Nixon, Daytona, and we loved this fairing by Screen and Plaster. We thought that was the bee's knees, and that's the one. I'm trying to remember Romero's, the fastest ever lap record around Daytona was about 160 miles an hour. That's when they just used to use the bowl for the lap, for setting the grid, etc. But in the expansion of the development area, a place called Umberslade Hall, we had a lot of guys from Blackburn Aircraft, and that helped us get involved. There's another one. Why does it do that? when I put it on my screen at home, it's perfect. That's the same picture, isn't it? Right, so we started to get involved with thinking about wind resistance. You can see there the shape, the start of what ended up looking like that one on the left. And although we didn't, it was forced upon us by people outside our shop, so we inherently didn't like it, but actually it increased the stability at the high speed a lot. And I think you see similar things in the motorbikes now, with those hollow sort of letterbox wings that stick out the side, gets them flat. So yeah, that's the team. This is moving on to 71 when we had this. We were the first, again, it's all old hat, but we were the first race bikes to have 3 disc brakes and a collected exhaust system. And when the exhaust system came along, we started off with 3 megaphones, because that's what everybody did. And it came in with about 50 horsepower. And as that's what sort of Norton Manxes were going out with, it's a bit like the man with the red flag. They said, oh no, impossible to ride that. So we got on to Brabham, who gave us a 3-into-1, a half of one of their straight 6s, a flat 3-into-1, which we tried on the test bed, and it did put the performance up a bit. So Doug designed a 3 at 120 degree one, and there's quite a bit in a 3-into-1 collector box. The angles, the volume in the middle, the overlap, and all these. Anyway, changed the bike completely. I mean, you could ride one of our works, 160 mile, you could ride on the high street, no problem at all. No problem. No megaphonitis, which everybody thought the racing bike had to have. And really made it fine. I'll give you a disc brake story. Again, showing how the world used to work. So, Daytona, Howard fell off and broke a disc. Probably on a sort of Friday-ish. Les Williams, the charge hand, picked up a... Oh, I was going to say just there, it's just gone away. There it is. You've got to get some discs. We were using standard Triumph car discs. So Les had to jump in his car and drive down to standard Triumph. He didn't know anybody there, nobody knew him. Saturday morning, had to talk his way in through the security and get guided to where the disc brake section was and pick up about a dozen brake discs and then ring up the foreman of the tool room and say, hey, we need these machines up by tomorrow. And then Monday morning they were posted off to America. I mean, you wouldn't get inside a bloody car factory like that today, I don't think. Yeah, we subsequently ended up with aluminium sprayed, eutectic metal sprayed discs, which are very light, but sometimes they did like to distort. Yeah, so I mean that's the 71 team. Bill Fallon, Arthur James, Jack Shannons, Fred Swift, me, Doug, and Les Williams. Of course, Les, I'm sure I've told so many stories about Les. Again, things that you wouldn't do today. He was a terrific comedian. Let me just have a quick. I mean, it's things like you'd open your lunchbox. This is a day, at the time when you made your sandwiches. You didn't go to a bloody posh place and buy a sandwich for 10 times what it cost you to make them at home. But you'd open your lunch pack and somebody had taken a bite out of your bloody sandwich. And then at one time, he got some food dye and injected into a guy's orange. So he opened his orange up and it's luminous, throbbing green. And then when he chucked it away, Les picked it up and ate it. Percy Tate, who had a farm, used to bring in a dozen eggs for people. Well, Les would take a couple out and hard boil them, put them back in. And I mean, you never wanted, if some of you asked to look at something that was mounted in a vice, it was metal, you'd never touch it because you'd get 40,000 volts because we had this obtained magneto. And yes, one of the classics, the absolute classic, one of the guys who's quite well known as Don Books, Huey Hancock, used to work in the service department where they used to overhaul and mend customers' second-hand bikes. And he used to ride a Tiger Cub wearing a black helmet with goggles. And every night he would leave the service shop on his Tiger Cub, ride down the big road in front of the factory, the main Birmingham Coventry road, get up to top gear, about sort of 30 miles an hour, both hands up, pull the goggles down. Lovely. Until the night when Les had sprayed black the inside of the glass of his goggles. And we all stood in a line and watched, killing ourselves. It was splendid. And yeah, another lazy trick, because we had the Tina scooter for nipping around, where they had a little button in the seat, so you had to be sitting down to start the thing. So Les's thing was, of course, to get it full throttle, standing astride it, full throttle, full revs, and then jump on the seat, and then go off. The only person who could wheelie a Tina scooter for a distance. Right, we just missed, because I didn't have things in the right order, this lovely posed picture with everybody smiling. But just basically to mention a few Dougisms. You can see the exhaust pipes are cut and shut, standard pipes made to fit. And I mean, I remember Doug and Arthur on the right there. Is this screen getting smaller? Anyway, like an example, say Doug was saying, I want the collector box. You can just see the collector box above where it says rotate. I've got an idea, I want a different collector box, different position. Can you do this? And of course, cutting and shutting and gas welding, it's a tough job. So Arthur would work. So every morning, Doug would come in off his bike, and his brain was full. He knew what everybody was doing all the time. And so we were going to be, let's do that. And so he said to Arthur, how's it going? Oh, right, yeah. Yeah, okay, Arthur, you've got the idea, but actually I want it a bit more that way, a bit more like this. Okay. And maybe you go through a week and there'll be 5 different variations, all being hand cut. And then we'd say, yeah, now I've seen it, I'm not quite sure. And the thing is, he would explain why. As I say, he wouldn't worry about people, you don't win races. It's like the sport, I mean, it's just me, but we used to win a lot of gold medals 5 years ago, and then all the athletes started moaning about being bullied, and the coaches telling them they were used to. Now the coaches are all friendly, we ain't winning any medals. In the same way, you couldn't say, oh, the poor ass will be a bit upset. You've got to do it. That's how you win things. Anyway, yes, back the other way. Oh, the other thing, yeah, just above that was an identical one. See the coils, there's 2 there and 1 on the other side. Doug was fanatic about rubber mounted. Yeah, because Triumph had a history of vibrations, things falling off. Not when Doug was in charge, he didn't. I think Arthur had to make, it was either 5 or 6 sets of coil mounted before Doug was happy. And he'd never believe, it's something from an outside supplier, like an electronic tacho, he wouldn't ever believe the words from anybody outside the factory saying, you've got to use this, it's brilliant, it'll do this and this. Everything had to be tested in-house. Don't believe the enemy. A quick picture of a works squish head. It just shows how it's all about the flat land on the piston coming up to the flat land. It's been machined in the cylinder head. So you have to start off knowing how much longer your conrod is going to be at full revs, which is about, from memory, about 13th thou, I think, on a triple. So you have to allow for that, and then it comes. You measure with a height gauge how high above the barrel place that land was, and then how deep it was into the cylinder head. And then Jack, I think he was the only person trusted to do it, at 8 places you measured it, and you get a hand scraper into the cylinder and scrape it. So, because the idea of how a squish works is a full jack, it's a squish of pushing the petrol air mixture into the middle of the cylinder. On the other hand, the piston's a bit heavier, etc. It gave maybe a couple of horsepower in the middle. You know, I say to people is when Cooper beat Agostini, he didn't have that. Yes, one of the non-squish pistons. I mean, I drew the thing, and the tops are always hand finished. Because of course you've got the recesses in the piston, and that's going vertical up and down, whereas the valve's at an angle. So it's a complex sort of thing. Anyway, I drew it up, and we had to hand do it, but to take the minimum metal off to keep the compression ratio where we wanted it. And then Hepworth and Grandage obviously got a copy of my picture and started selling those pistons as without an instruction saying the valves and pistons are going to hit each other unless you get your act together. There's another doggism. The great idea, again this is in my book, you've got DEV 1511, it shows my book has all the development numbers in it. The sharp-eyed amongst you might notice a crack at the bottom, just there. So great idea. You've got 3 sorts of weight: dead weight, rotating weight, and reciprocating weight. And obviously the rockers, if anything's reciprocating, you save weight, it's good stuff. To get these bloody things made in titanium was a nightmare. I mean, that's a forging, and of course all the characteristics of titanium are very different to the steel you're normally making a thing with. And I can remember the guys going off in deep snow in a van with shovels to go and pick these things up from the factory where they've been made. And it had been going on for months, and it came through, and the guys came into the experimental with this box saying, Doug, look, first titanium rockers have come. And Doug looked at this one and clamped it in a vice with one arm sticking up, jumped up onto the workbench, asked for a £1 hammer. All in his head he's doing how many foot-pounds, sorry I'm talking old units, how many foot-pounds is this stuff going to take at full charge? And then he went, dong, and that was the result, a crack. So he jumped down on the bench and said, thank you gentlemen, and went